All right. Hi, everyone. I think we can get started. I'm Murray Gargano with the Office of Arts and Culture, and I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. We are recording this presentation, and it will be on our website, so just so you know from the beginning. I wish that we were going to talk about funding for a different reason, but I am grateful to be able to present this $7.5 million of Federal CARES Act recovery money that the Mayor and City Council approved for the creative economy. You'll see as we go through this process, there might be some uncertainty because this has been an evolving process, but we in the Office of Arts and Culture have really tried to streamline and simplify the process. We've been talking to many colleagues across the country, and we know that we are lucky to have a mayor and a city council who believe in and invest in our creative economy. I know that I've been working so closely with Mayor Steinberg, Councilman Hanson, Councilman Guerra, and others to make this process come to life. And I really think, I know I owe them a great thanks. And so if you see any of them, make sure you give them your thanks as well. While we're on this call, we ask that you stay muted and keep your camera off for bandwidth. I'm going to do a short presentation and then answer questions following that. As you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat feature in the bottom middle of your screen. Melissa Cerrone, our Arts Education Manager for the Office of Arts and Culture, is with us tonight. She's going to keep an eye on the chat, recording questions you may have, and present them after the initial presentation. You can find all the information that we're going to talk about tonight on our website at arts.cityofsacramento.org/grants. You'll see it on the presentation screen right now. And I know that Diana Riffner from our office is putting it in the chat as well, so you have it available. This presentation and recording of this workshop will be posted on the website shortly. Tonight is intended to be an overview of all of the programs. We also have additional specific workshops scheduled that I'll mention later. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. A little background to catch everybody up. The City of Sacramento was awarded $89.6 million of federal CARES relief money because our population is over 500,000. On May 7th, Mayor Steinberg recommended 4 buckets, $20 million each for this money, going to small business, youth and workforce training, the city's homeless and rehousing plan, and of course, arts and creative economy and tourism. On May 26th, the mayor and council approved the first $28 million of that $89 million. And you can read here all of the categories that were funded, finishing with $5 million to bolster the city's battered creative economy, as well as assist iconic institutions, including the Sacramento Zoo and Fairy Tale Town. At last week's council meeting on June 30th, council approved an additional $2.5 million for the creative sector for a total of $7.5 million. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how we in the Office of Arts and Culture are going to get that money out to you. Really important is the way that the federal government is handling the CARES Act relief funds. The City of Sacramento has put together a complete web page for everyone to find resources. It's that cityofsacramento.org/CARES. Before we even talk about anything, there are 3 key elements that if anyone using these CARES funds must keep in mind. First of all, any funds have to be necessary expenditures incurred due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. So any argument, any case we make, we have to keep that at the forefront. The second important point is these funds that we're asking for were not accounted for in the fiscal year 2020 budget. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we're making, in general, this is about making sure you're not trying to recover funds that have already been included in your budget through another grant or through another resource. And finally, all of these funds must be expended before December 30th, 2020. So if you get a grant from us, all of that money has to be spent by the end of this year. We recommend that everyone before you start asking questions or get too far into the process, review these federal guidelines. They're actually very brief. The CARES Act guidelines, there's a link at this website. It's about 3.5 pages of general guidelines we got. A couple weeks later, on June 24th, the federal government put an additional FAQ out clarifying some things. The city of Sacramento has put together our version of a flow chart, and it's probably a little difficult to see, but if you go to that website, you can see this entire flow chart very clearly. But in general, whenever we're looking at how do we spend the CARES Act funds, we ask, does it qualify in any of these categories? Is it going to be used for medical expenses, public health expenses, payroll for public safety, similar employees substantially dedicated to COVID-19 response? Are we spending the money on compliance with public health orders, such as we were paying for mandated closures because of the pandemic, or support those suffering from economic harm, or reasonably related to the function of government? When we get into the applications for the grants, you will have to check one of these or more that your proposal applies to. So most of us are going to be complying with public health orders because we are forced to close our doors. Some of us will be we will be creating programs that support those suffering from economic harm. So keep that in mind. When we knew that we were getting this money and we would have to create programs to get it out to the community, this is the process we really took reaching out within the community. First of all, everything is relating to the goals of the Creative Edge Cultural Plan. The Cultural Equity Statement that has been adopted by the Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy Commission. That is at the forefront of every decision we're making at the Office of Arts and Culture. Of course, the mayor and city council weighed in on how these monies will be spent. We had 3 meetings with current grantees. We had at least 4 meetings with the creative economy in partnership with Atrium 916, and we met with peer cities who are in similar situation with us. So that takes us right into the grants that we have open. If you think about this very broadly, we have 2 categories of grants. You can either get reimbursement for loss caused by COVID, or you can propose a program that supports people who have been harmed due to COVID-19. We've further divided it into nonprofit and for-profit. So if you are a nonprofit organization, we have a reimbursement grant that you probably qualify for. In detail, nonprofits that have experienced financial hardship because of the crisis caused by the coronavirus may apply for reimbursement for eligible general operating expenses between March 1st and June 30th. All of these funds have to be expended by December 30th. I'm just going to reiterate that, even though this is a reimbursement grant. And grantees will work with mentors that we have available so that the whole process is clear. So who is eligible to apply for the nonprofit reimbursement? We have these categories, which are which are aligned with the cultural plan. First of all, if you are a current Office of Arts and Cultural annual grantee, and that's specifically if you currently have a Cultural Arts Award or a Cultural Equity Investment Award, you will apply for this nonprofit reimbursement. If you are a Cultural Equity Investment nonprofit, and I will get into delve deeper into these definitions later, but basically, if you are a small cultural organization that serves cultural communities and your operating budget is less than $500,000, you can apply for this reimbursement. If you are a nonprofit organization that is an arts education nonprofit, or if you are a nonprofit that has an arts education program that presents in and out of school arts education programs, you can apply for reimbursement. And finally, if you are a nonprofit organization and you have already bought equipment to help you transition into a virtual world due to COVID, or if you have already purchased personal protective equipment, you can get reimbursed for that. That's the first category, the first grant. The second grant we have is also for nonprofits, and this is our program grant. Now, this is the grant we're almost used to. It's developing a program. Now, it's a little more challenging to get this grant for programs because it has to go through an additional approval process with the city manager and the city attorney to make sure that all of the expenses will be eligible. But nonprofits may propose programs to support those who were harmed due to mandated closures by the coronavirus. It's important to note that the programs must be complete by December 30th. And applicants may apply for multiple programs, but they have to do a separate application for each one. Now, who can apply for this? Again, this is a nonprofit grant. Excuse me. So cultural equity investment nonprofits with an operating budget of less than $500,000 a year can apply with the program. Arts education nonprofits or programs can apply for this, and partnering organizations that form a collective or collaborative can apply for this. I'll talk about that in more detail, but I want to point out right now that a collective or collaborative is a new category that Councilman Hanson asked us to create. And this is the ability for more than one organization to come together, create a program that will serve a community that's been harmed. And we can pool resources so it could be a higher value, a dollar value. We must have one nonprofit lead, be the lead organization to take care of all of the paperwork and all of the finances. The third grant is for profit. So this we are calling the Creative Economy Reimbursement Grant. So again, reimbursement for expenses. Individual creatives, individual artists, and creative businesses that have experienced the financial hardship because of the crisis caused by coronavirus may apply for reimbursement for eligible operating expenses. The timeline for all of these reimbursements is March 1st to June 30th, and of course, expended by December 30th. Who can apply for this one? This grant is specifically for individual artists in our community who have lost gigs and employment or other reimbursables. We had an example today. An artist was working in a building. All of their equipment was there. The building closed, so they had to purchase a new set of equipment to do their work at home. And we think that that should be a reimbursable cost. Also, this category, for-profit creative businesses that contribute to Sacramento's creative economy. So the local music venues, any other creative business that is contributing. The last category is very specific. This is our reimbursement grant for city cultural assets. Cultural organizations that manage, lease, or occupy city cultural properties may apply for reimbursement for these general operating support losses due to the closure. This category, the documents are reimbursement for March 1st to May 30th. So who can apply for this one? This one is, again, specific nonprofit organizations that manage, lease, or occupy city cultural properties or facilities. It's not people who lease in these, it's those who actually run the properties. So this is our portal site. We're using a program called Submittable for you to apply. Applications are now open, and they're open until July 22nd until 11:59 p.m. These applications will close. So here is the direct this is the direct address if you want to go to the application. You can also hit it at that arts.city of Sacramento website, which is our homepage. Again, we've got 4 categories. I will go into a little more detail later, but you click the category that you would like. There's more information under more, and then you submit to open up the application. We'll go through one in a little bit. I want to go over the timeline for the entire process. So the applications are now open July 8th to 22nd. We're doing outreach this entire time, and we need everyone's help for the outreach. That means making sure that everyone who could potentially or possibly apply for any one of these grants knows about it and has all of the information needed. So if you know people who need to learn about this, make sure they connect with us, and we'll talk about more ways to connect in a little bit. After the applications, and actually during the application process, our city team will be reviewing all of the applications for eligibility, checking the documentation of operating expenses, all of your receipts. We then will take the eligible applications to our panel. So our grant panel, who will be making decisions about ranking applications and deciding allocations, is made up of the Arts, Cultural, and Creative Economy Commission, plus additional community members. We're anticipating that process will take a couple weeks. We're aiming for August 21st for a panel decision. Once that panel decision happens, we will be able to start the process of getting contracts written and checks out with those contracts. Any large amount that is granted out, more than $250,000, we do have to take that proposal back to City Council on September 1st to get their approval of that. So that's the overall timeline. It really is quick in this kind of process, even though it seems like it's still a couple months away. We're going to do our best to make it as short as possible. So tonight is our second grant overview that we've opened to the community. We have some more specific grant workshops that we're offering specifically for the different audiences that we generally work with and align with the Creative Edge cultural plan. So tomorrow morning, Melissa Cerrone is going to lead an arts education focused workshop, and it will really specifically target the applications for that are eligible for arts education organizations. Thursday night, we're going to do a creative economy focus. This is going to be a partnership with the Atrium 916, part of their series of creative economy meetings. On Friday, Richard Falcone and I are going to do a cultural equity investment focused workshop. And this is really designed at organizations that we don't typically work with, new organizations, and definitely organizations that have a cultural focus and a budget of less than $500,000 a year already. Additionally, we have 2 general grant writing workshops scheduled. This is really going to look at our process, look at the questions, look at our software to make sure everyone has the best tools when they're applying. So these are July 10th and July 16th, one in the morning and one in the evening. Additionally, we are setting up some specific times that you can apply for, or you can register for an appointment with staff. There will be more information here set up, and we will basically, they'll have a calendar. You can schedule 15 or 30 minutes with staff with questions concerning your application. If you do have a quick question, you just need to get an answer from it. We have an email hotline now for these grants, and it is artgrants@cityofsacramento.org. So send off your question, and we will get it to the right person to get it answered. That is really if you just need something quick to happen. All right. So I want to shift gears just a little bit. The city of Sacramento does have other programs getting this CARES money out. And one program that is open that I know many of you probably already know about is our small business program. This is run through our economic development team. Now, you are able to apply for both a small business forgivable loan and our creative economy grants. However, you are only allowed to be awarded in one category. So if you get the small business loan, you will pull the eligibility from our creative economy. You have to make a decision what's best for you, but I just want to point out a couple of the highlights. So more information about the small business loan, here's the cityofsacramento.org/bizloans. Basically, they have pre-identified maximum amounts that the award will provide for grantees. So if you're a home-based business, one to two full-time equivalent employees, you'll receive $2,500. If you have 5 or fewer full-time equivalent employees, that's a $5,000 micro grant or micro loan. And if you have 6 to 20 full-time employees, your maximum is $25,000. So the small business program is really concerned with how many applications they might get. If they receive more applications than they have funding for, they will put everything through eligibility, and then they will have a lottery process for that. So for us, that probably means that we're going to recommend, if you are a creative entity in our community contributing to that creative economy, you want to consider our grants. So right from the beginning, these will be grants in those categories we already talked about. We are looking at that $7.5 million holistically through an equity lens. So our idea is that we are looking at what applications come in and we distribute that money as needed. So first of all, we're going to look at our reimbursable grants. And remember, all of the first round for these reimbursable grants are for expenses incurred between March 1st and June 30th. If you decide to do a creative economy grant, reimbursable grant, you can include all of your expenses that are eligible. And we have a process for making that happen so it's clear. And that could be anywhere from $5,000, $25,000. We've already gotten some larger amounts. The city manager has authority to adjust the amounts within that $7.5 million. So we want to make sure we cover everyone as equitably as possible. So, and the panel will make that recommendation on the allocation of how many grants are allocated in each category. And I'll talk a little bit about the criteria of how they will make those decisions. So the maximum in the small business program is $25,000. We're looking at distributing our money as fairly as possible, and there could be larger amounts from the Creative Economy program. Just a couple overviews. If you are choosing to do one of the reimbursement grants, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit, we need specific evidence of your loss, that you have to demonstrate that. So again, we've talked about, you can apply for loss, general operating support loss. You can apply for equipment that you have purchased already before June 30th to make up for a reason caused by the COVID. And if you are an individual artist, you can apply for a lost gig or canceled work. So on our website, we have versions of this you can download and you can work on before you do your application. But basically, if you were closed down because of the coronavirus, or mostly closed down, and you couldn't make revenue, but you were still paying these operating expenses, you can apply for reimbursement. So between March 1st and June 30th is what we're working on through this round one of grants. You put your total amount, you describe what it is, and you will have to attach documentation with this that matches and aligns with this. So that documentation might be a receipt, a letter from your landlord, a letter from someone who canceled the gig, an email, some sort of bill, anything that shows that you were connected to the lost revenue. Same thing with equipment. And again, equipment is PPE or technical equipment if you had to shift from virtual or online, face-to-face to virtual programming and lost or canceled work. So the best thing to do is complete this worksheet and then copy and paste, make one long document of all of your receipts, number them so it's clearly defined so that both the panelists, our staff, and the auditors have a clear description of all of your loss here. The easiest thing for us to review is to have this in one document, but if that's not possible, you can upload this and then individual receipts. And I'll show you that when we look at the program. I wanted to dig in just a little bit deeper with who's eligible to apply for what and define that. And this is in every grant guideline. It's on our website, and I'm just going to go over this too. So again, you apply for either reimbursement or a program, and within those categories, you will select how you self-identify. So for example, if you want to do a program and you're an arts education organization or nonprofit, that means that you do in-school programs that enrich arts and cultural literacy for preschool to grades 12 through education and outreach. And it actually can go through age 24. Collectives and collaboratives again. So you can create a program and you can apply for this as a group. So the collective or collaborative must have at least one, or will have one lead organization that is a nonprofit and must have at least one more organization that they're partnering with. The collective must serve an inclusive, diverse audience, including the LANA, LGBTQ+, and intellectually and developmentally disabled or other culturally specific population. So it needs to be inclusive. This can include a for-profit organization as long as the nonprofit organization takes the lead. So again, we're anticipating if you choose to put together a collective or a collaborative, this is going to be a higher dollar amount program that reaches a lot of people, has a lot of impact, and you can demonstrate that in your application. Creative businesses, this is right along the lines of our regular creative economy grants. So creative businesses may be known as a firm, association, etc. And they have contributed to our creative economy in Sacramento. Our cultural assets, again, very specific, an organization that manages, leases, or occupies one of our cultural facilities. Cultural investment, equity investment, again, we are hoping to reach out and meet brand new organizations that we've not met before. This is meant for small organizations, emerging organizations, organizations with an operating budget under $500,000. Again, that identify as cultural organizations that reach cultural communities. The idea is that these organizations must not be currently receiving an annual grant from the city of Sacramento. Current Office of Arts and Cultural Grantees, again, these are Cultural Arts Awards or Cultural Equity Investment Grantees. If you're already receiving that annual support from us, you can apply in this as a current grantee. So if you have, if you know that you just have a lot of equipment expenses and you want to do an equipment grant for that reimbursement and keep it separate from anything else, you can do an equipment grant. So this is again, PPE and technology. And finally, the last category is individual artists. And we're not here to identify or define what individual artists are at this point, but what the individual artists can do is if they have lost gigs, that they can demonstrate that loss through an email, through a letter, through a canceled contract, something, we can help them get reimbursed for that cost. Individual artists are also or have been eligible for unemployment. So this grant does not take care of those expenses from unemployment. So we can't reimburse living expenses, but we can reimburse lost business did I say that right? Lost living expenses, but we can do business expenses. So I bring this up because if you could actually apply for multiple grant categories. For example, if you are a current grantee of OAC, you can do the general reimbursement. If you also have an arts education program, you can separate that out and write a separate grant application for arts education program. So each time you will just start a new application and identify which category you most closely identify. Before we get into specific examples, I just want to point out that any of you have worked with the city before knows that we are a government entity, and there are some things that you just have to make sure happen. So for any of these grants, there are 4 things that we want you to know right from the beginning. First of all, you do have to have a city vendor account, and we will help you through this process. I just want to make sure you understand this process. This means you get an official number that you're a partner with the city, and this is how you upload your tax information. For any time we do business, we give out money as a grant. The grantee must have $1 million of liability insurance. Everyone who does business with the city has to be part of our business occupancy tax program. If you are a for-profit organization, you have to actually get a certificate and pay a tax. If you are a nonprofit organization, you have to get an exemption certificate, and we will help you through that process. If you live within the city limits and your office is at home, the city requires a home office permit, which is another application process. Let me specifically say it right now, all the grantees, this is money that was granted to the city of Sacramento for residents of Sacramento. So legal businesses, the addresses must be inside the city limits of Sacramento. Just one thing that I want to clarify before we move on is this full-time equivalent FTE. You're going to see this in the application, and we ask everyone, how many people were employed of your organization or your business on May 30th, 2020? Now, we ask it in the terms of FTE, full-time equivalent. That means you will take all of your hours that you've paid employees, and you will divide it by 40, and that will tell you the full-time equivalent number of employees. It's written out there, and you can ask more questions if that's not clear enough for you. Okay, I am going to, again, there's our arts.cityofsacramento.org /grants takes you right to our landing page. And I want to take us there very quickly. So I'm going to switch the screen that I'm sharing very quickly. And maybe share with you. This is the Office of Arts and Culture's webpage. Trying to get to it in 1 second. So if you go to arts.cityofsacramento.org, this takes you here, and under latest news, it talks right about our grants, more details here, and this takes you to our landing page. It's the same website, just /grants. This is where you find all of the information you're going to need and keep coming back to here. All of the additional informational workshops that we mentioned, you probably already received. This is where you came to get into this meeting. These are links right to the Zoom. So you just click on it at the time and date, and you will be in the meeting. We will be putting up virtual office hours here. This is where you'll be able to schedule if you want to talk to one of the staff about filling out your application or your application. We will put up this video, that PowerPoint presentation right here in a few days. And finally, you can click right here. You can get a copy of that cover sheet for your reimbursables. It will download in a Word document and you can manipulate it as you see fit. Here is in the PowerPoint at the beginning, we talked about the general guidelines put out by the federal government. Again, these are the links to those documents. I recommend that you click on these, that you, at least the first couple, you read through, you'll have a better understanding of what is eligible. After this morning meeting, I really got a lot of questions about eligibility, and they can, if you just peruse these documents, you're gonna have a better understanding of a lot of the eligibility put out by the federal government. These are the grants that we have available. Again, we already went through the city cultural assets, nonprofit reimbursement, nonprofit programs, for-profit creative businesses. At the bottom, I've put those definitions of categories again if you need to read through that. But you'll see under each grant category, we have some clickable links. The first one are to complete grant guidelines that explain everything, hopefully in detail for you, and then how to go directly to that grant to apply. So if you want to look at specific grant guidelines, you just click on it and it brings it up. I want to take you through the structure of all of the grant guidelines. Look very similar. Again, it gives you all of that federal information and says, take a look at it, the clickable links. It again tells you who should apply for this particular grant, and it defines that category. Talks about organizational eligibility. So in general, nonprofits are going to be, the nonprofit organizations have to have a 501c3. Unfortunately, for these grants, we can't do fiscal agents. Read through all of this information. Again, we just remind you that you have to be a vendor with the city. You have to have $1 million liability insurance, a BOT, and it also talks about the difference between the small business program. One thing I haven't talked about yet, which is other federal CARES Act assistance. So in your application, we're going to ask you if you've already received a PPP loan or an EIDL loan or other CARES Act money. All of the federal CARES Act money is meant to help the community. However, all expenses must be unique expenses. So for example, if you already got reimbursement from a PPP for staff costs, you cannot ask for reimbursement again. So anything that you've already identified through another CARES Act, you cannot use it in this application. All of the questions for each grant are written out here so you can have an idea of what you're going to have to ask before you get into the program, into the online program. Each one of these grant guidelines, if you scroll down, it provides you with grant criteria. So the process, again, we receive your application, the city staff is going to look at it for eligibility. It then goes to our panel, which is made up of the ACE Commission and other members of our community. They are going to review all of the applications through a different lens. They're going to start with equity in general to make sure that we reach everyone we need to reach. They are then going to look at your overall narrative and overall eligibility that goes beyond the federal guidelines, meaning do you work with an inclusive organization? Are you nonprofit? That sort of thing. And they will rate your application. So our hope is that in an ideal world, every grant application will be awarded to your fullest ask. And that would be fantastic if it happens. However, if we get more requests for funding than we have funds, the panel will then start looking at eligibility in this sense based on your application. So really make sure as you answer your questions that you look through, you really think about what the panel is going to be looking at. In the questions, you're going to be asked to select your gross revenue for fiscal year 2020 and your estimated gross revenue for fiscal year 2021. This will be one of the categories that the panel might look at to see what your intended loss really is going to be. All right, so I think that I'm going to stop there and bring Melissa Cerrone back on. She has been looking at your questions. If you still have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and she's going to take it away, Melissa. Ask me what people are
All right. What have they asked?
wondering about.
What is considered a creative business? And does media and journalism qualify as a creative business?
I think so. Media and journalism, anyone that's contributing to that creative economy. You know, we haven't made a specific definition throughout the city, so I think you can make a case for it.
So you make a case for it. So even if it were a florist or a store owner, do we have any kind of guidelines that we want to use, or is it just you define?
The guideline is you make the majority of your living in some sort of creation, some sort of creative art business or cultural business, yes.
Okay. Are the 4 requirements needed before submitting the application or after the award is granted?
Before submitting the application.
Okay. If an artist lost a mural commission and they were going to use the money for living expenses, would they be able to apply to receive the amount they lost from the commission as a reimbursement? Or would they only be able to apply for the amount of money they spent on materials?
Ooh, so if you had a contract for the mural, you could apply to be reimbursed for that lost gig, that lost contract.
Okay.
So you shouldn't think that you would be reimbursed for both supplies and the contract, because I imagine that the supplies were part of the contract. So I would choose the one that's greater.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this, but if you're already receiving an organizational CAA award, can you apply for reimbursement expenses that relate to the same program areas but are not covered by the CAA grant?
If it is directly caused by closures due to COVID. So every sentence that you start with should be, because we closed because of COVID, we had this expense.
Well, I think you were really thorough, because those are the only questions I have.
Wow.
Oh, wait a minute, there's another one. How can community members be involved in the project selection process, and who is the selection panel?
We are still first of all, we have our Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy Commission will be leading the panel, and we need additional panel members. So if you are interested, you can go to our website at that arts.cityofsacramento.org, and it's easiest to search for panel or look under the grant programs, and you can apply to be a panelist. Now, I will say that from the dais, City Council has asked us to have one overarching panel for this. We will creatively divide it up so the work is distributed throughout the panel, but all of the panelists will be required to be familiar with every application. So it's going to be some work.
Okay.
We would love to have you.
There's another one. I'm not sure if my art space qualifies for any of the categories. We're an artist-run gallery space for special arts projects. We are completely non-commercial, but we do not hold a nonprofit status. We're currently expending quite a bit of money out of pocket to prepare for the safe CDC compliant art openings. We're not experiencing losses due to COVID, but instead are spending personal money to be health guideline compliant. Our art space has been open since 2018 and is run out of a private garage.
I think if if you are a for-profit entity, then, and you have these expenses that you're buying PPE or other materials to transition, we can reimburse what you've spent through June 30th at this point. So for everyone, our goal is to get another allocation of this money, and we will have hopefully, we will have a second round of reimbursement from July 1st through December.
Okay. I'm a book artist, and most of my gigs
That
are
was
in the Bay.
quick.
Whoops, you ready? I'm a book artist, and most of my gigs are in the Bay Area because there is a large book arts community there. I had 2 fairs that I was going to participate, but one was canceled and another postponed. Should I apply? I also had a number of classes canceled. So
Yeah,
there were
so,
gigs that weren't here. Yeah.
right. So these are, this money is intended to help relief of people who live in the city of Sacramento. So as long as your physical legal address is within the city, you can apply for lost gigs wherever they are. So just to be clear, that would be if you had a contract or if you paid a registration fee, you could get reimbursement for that.
Okay, and what kind of documentation would you like for if somebody had a contract? What would you want to see in documentation?
You can put really the cancellation of the contract. If it's an email, if it was in writing, try to get it in writing. One of the examples we had was if you are a musician who is performing every week at, say, the Ace of Spades, and then on Facebook they announced canceling, closure and cancel. You cannot use that Facebook post unless your name was in the cancel. So you need something very specific. So when an auditor looks at it, they're like, yes, you lost that business.
Okay. If your contract has been postponed and if you're uncertain if it will eventually be canceled, should I apply to cover those expenses ahead of time?
It really does need to be a cancellation at this point.
Okay. Can you reiterate what you mean by artists not being able to use these grants to cover living expenses?
Right. So it's very specific. You can, if you were applying for unemployment, then those funds would cover your living expenses, your rent, that sort of thing. So this Federal CARES Act money through our creative economy is meant to supplement your business, professional business. So if you lost a gig, if you purchased something because you changed venues and that directly related to COVID, then you can apply for reimbursement for that.
And that brings us to the end of our questions.
All right. So again, that doesn't mean you can't ask any more questions. Reach out to us. That always go to our website first if you need more information at arts.cityofsacramento.org. Specifically, if you have a question, that hotline email is artgrants@cityofsacramento.org. So very similar. And with that, we're glad you joined us. Please spread the word as far as you can and send people to our other workshops so more people know about this. Thanks a lot and have a good night.
Thanks.